The other day I was listening to a podcast and I came across this phrase that somebody threw out called Resigned Hedonism. And it just stuck in my memory as a perfect description of how I think so many of us, myself most of all, have lived our lives up until this point. And I have a lot of friends in different hobbies and activities and different ages, and they all really love what they do, but sometimes I feel there's this sense underneath that they've given up on a lot of things that I think people have a right to want and to be angry about not having. Things like an affordable home, or a family, or a partner who needs them, or meaningful for work. And maybe you could say that's entitled to want those things or to feel like one deserves those things. But regardless of whether or not that's true, I get the feeling that a lot of people, and like I say, myself included, somewhere along the way we've given up on life. So resigned hedonism, I think, looks like engaging in dopaminergic activities on a daily basis, running on the treadmill of social media, of YouTube, the news, entertainment, video games, pornography, whatever it is, to keep these feelings of disappointment at bay. And all of these things are so interesting and so exciting that they allow us to surf this wave of shallowness and avoid addressing the fact that there's really quite little substance to life nowadays. There's a lot of outrage, there's a lot of strong emotion to be found and to be experienced on the internet. There used to be a meme, and it's not really just a meme, it's actually true, that when a lot of people get to the end of their lives, they look back and they say, oh, I wish I hadn't spent so much time at work. For our generation, I expect that when our time comes, nobody's going to look back and say, I wish I spent more time watching Instagram. How many of us know intimately the experience of walking through the forest with your friend and loving them so much that you can't put it into words, or holding your grandparents' hand while they pass away and knowing that that's going to be you too someday soon, or walking along the beach with no phone and no music, just experiencing the moment, falling in love, breaking someone's heart, having your heart broken, holding somebody's hand when they're anxious. All of these things are available underneath the surface of constant distraction. And I'm not saying that that's all there is to life, these big things, or that distractions in themselves are bad. But I think distractions have become life for many people, and they have for me for many years. For me, the thing I did, which I wouldn't really recommend because it's so challenging and painful, is to disconnect from all of these things, at least for a period of time. And what I experienced is that life kind of rushes up to meet me. All of the regrets, the grief, the missed opportunities, the relationships that didn't work out, kind of hit in a bit of a tidal wave. And that's been my experience recently since doing this practice. But in that tidal wave, as it crashes onto the shore of consciousness, of the mind, it creates all of these little bubbles of joy, little bubbles of opportunity to actually get your life back. And I think that's what life is. It's remembering the feeling of being a child. I was lucky enough to have an idyllic childhood in a safe countryside where there was lots of nature and things like this. But regardless, everybody has a memory of who they are from that age, before the cynicism made us cool and calculated, before we knew that it wasn't possible to get our way in every situation. And that's all an important part of growing up. But it's important not to lose that connection to our essence. And this might all sound very abstract, and I think the reason that is because we live in this world of resigned hedonism, where the essence of who we are and having contact with each other and with nature feels like a faraway, almost ridiculous thing. But that's really the poverty of the modern man in the developed world. And we think of poverty as not having enough money, and that is a form of poverty. But there are other poverties that never get spoken about. I'm talking about emotional poverty, spiritual poverty, relationship poverty, are perhaps not as acute or as dangerous as financial poverty, but nonetheless are forms of poverty that need addressing, in my humble opinion. If you disconnect from social media, if you disconnect from the news, digital entertainment, movies, TV shows, things like this, you may find something similar happens, where the rush of life that's been held back by this door of repressed hedonism can come rushing through, and it can be a bit intense. But I would rather live in the real world, and by the real world I don't mean that what happens online is not real. It's very powerful and useful, but to me the real world is about the five senses. It's about the people who are in my environment, not influencers who live far away, who I don't, never going to meet, never going to have relationships with those people. And it's about contact. Contact is seeing somebody's true face, letting them see yours. It's about sticking around in relationships even when things become difficult, not because that's always the right thing to do, but because there's so much more to learn from persevering than there is from moving on to the next thing, the next person. In my humble opinion, it's almost impossible to get through to somebody who is in the grip of resigned hedonism. I mean, every friend I speak to about this, for example, is well aware, painfully aware of how much time they spend looking at their phone. And yet when we talk about it a few weeks later, they're in exactly the same position as they were when we had the initial conversation, and a year later and 3 years later, nothing really changes. And I think that is the resigned part. One of my best friends, whenever he comes to stay, will spend 45 minutes to an hour to 2 hours every morning, and before he goes to sleep, scrolling on social media. And hell, I'm exactly the same with podcasts and pornography and all that shit. But there has to be something inside that draws a person into the real world. And if that's not there, I don't think that it's really worth putting energy into trying to get other people to change. It's much more profitable to change oneself. And often the project of getting other people to change is a kind of projection to avoid changing ourselves. And look, I'm not saying that that's always the case. I think it is often the case. So if you like what I'm describing and maybe would like help with it, where you find the idea of living a life with fewer distractions, then reach out to me, leave a comment below, send me an email. I'll get back to you. Have a good day.